On Thanksgiving, when families are supposed to come together, my dad kicked me out like I was nothing. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I just cut off every single bill I had ever paid for them and watched their perfect life crumble. Funny thing is, it wasn't even revenge. It was just letting reality catch up. My name is Rachel Collins. I'm 24 years old, living with my parents and younger brother in a small town outside Nashville, Tennessee. I work at a local insurance company. The salary isn't much, but it keeps the lights on, the water running, and the internet working. Without me, the heater would have died last winter. This Thanksgiving, I came home after my shift, coat still zipped, coffee clinging to my sleeves. The table was set lazily, tired centerpiece, dry turkey. Mom, Ellen, shuffled around the kitchen. Dad, Frank, sat at the head of the table, nursing a glass of whiskey, staring into nothing. Dinner started in brittle silence. I scooped mashed potatoes onto my plate, forcing a smile at my brother Logan. Then Dad slammed his knife down, the noise making me jump. "Rachel," he said, locking eyes with me. "You're dead weight. You're not staying here anymore." I froze. Mom laughed nervously, like she could erase the moment. But Dad's face stayed cold. Logan gaped, fork frozen midair. "You heard me," Dad said. "My house, my rules. You're out." I hadn't stayed because I needed a roof. I stayed because they needed me. Dad had lost his job. Mom only worked part-time. Without my paycheck, they wouldn't have survived. And now, on Thanksgiving, they were treating me like a parasite. Mom opened her mouth, but Dad cut her off sharply. "I've made my decision." Logan's voice cracked. "If they can throw you out..." "Who's next?" I inhaled slowly. I didn't need to argue. They'd made their choice. Now I would make mine. I stood, scraping back my chair, carried my half-eaten plate to the sink. I gave Logan a small nod, the only goodbye I could manage. Upstairs, I packed my clothes in silence. No tears, no pleading. Tomorrow, the heater would go silent, and the house would feel exactly as cold as they made it. I pulled my suitcase from under the bed and started folding my clothes. Every shirt, every notebook I bought with overtime pay, quietly packed away. This room once comforted me. Now it was just a shell, a soft knock. "Rachel?" Logan whispered. "Did you lock the door?" I opened it. He stepped in, shoulders hunched. "Are you really leaving?" His eyes were red, but he stayed strong. I nodded. "They said it, didn't they? I have no reason to stay." Logan sat heavily on the bed, glancing around. The half-empty room. But who's going to pay for the electricity? The internet? He already knew the answer. I wasn't just a sister. I was the life support they depended on. "I know," I said softly. "But I can't live my whole life as a walking wallet, Logan. I deserve to breathe." He clenched his fists. "I want to go with you." I froze. "You can't. You're still in school, still a minor." "Then where will you go?" "I'll stay at Tessa's for a few days. I have savings. I'll manage." Logan looked down. "They don't deserve you." I sat beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Doesn't matter. What matters is you don't get trapped too. Hold on a little longer. When you're old enough, I'll help you leave." He nodded slowly. "You'll text me, right?" "Every day." He slipped away down the hall. The look he gave me twisted something deep inside. I finished packing, double-checking drawers and corners. Near midnight, suitcase ready, I pulled out my phone and logged into every bill account, electricity, internet, water, Mom's second credit card. I removed my information from all of them. No more silent warnings. No more invisible sacrifices. I wheeled my suitcase downstairs. No one came to stop me. The TV buzzed in the living room as if nothing had changed. Opened the door. The freezing wind hit my face. But for the first time in years, I felt free. That Thanksgiving night, there was no snow. But inside, I was frozen. Not from the weather, but from awakening. I had thought I was helping a family. Now I realized I had only enabled their dependence. I pulled into Tessa's driveway just before midnight. When she opened the door and saw me with my suitcase, she didn't ask questions. She just hugged me tightly. "Stay as long as you need," she said. I slept on her couch, wrapped in a quilt that smelled faintly of vanilla. The next morning, I sat at her kitchen table, opened my laptop, and began severing the last invisible chains. I logged into every utility, account electricity, internet, water, even the streaming services. One by one, I removed my name. Each time a pop-up asked if I was sure, I was sure. When I finished, I leaned back, exhaling, not with satisfaction, with relief. No more bills, no more being drained dry under the label of family. The next few days passed quietly. Work, dinner with Tessa, reading before bed, no yelling, no guilt trips. But peace never lasts when people like my father lose their scapegoat. By Wednesday, my phone buzzed nonstop. 5 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, 1 text from Logan. Power's out. Dad's losing it. I didn't reply. An hour later, another text. "Rachel, what's happening? Internet's down." Dad's furious. Still, I stayed silent. That night, while Tessa and I were making dinner, my phone rang again. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mom's voice trembled. "The power's out. The TV won't work. Your dad's screaming. What's going on?" I kept my voice even. "Who do you think paid for all of that the last 4 years?" Silence, then a broken whisper. But your father said." "Exactly," I said, cutting her off. "You believed him. Now live with it." I hung up. At the time, I thought it was over. I was wrong. I thought cutting the bills, changing passwords, locking down accounts would end it. But people like my father didn't know how to survive without someone to blame. 3 days after I left, Logan texted during my shift. "Power's out. Dad smashed the microwave, punched the fuse box." I didn't answer. I knew that house was crumbling, and this was just the beginning. That night, leaving the office, I saw 6 missed calls from Mom. By the 7th, I picked up. Her voice was raw and furious. "Rachel, what have you done? No lights, no hot water. Dad's losing it." I stayed calm. "I just turned off what I was paying for. You wanted me gone. Now take care of yourselves." "You can't do this," she cried. I steadied my voice. "No. Dad already did. I'm just following orders." Silence, broken only by her heavy breathing. Finally, she whispered, "Your father thinks you're trying to get revenge." I laughed dryly. "No, Mom. I'm just living my life. What bothers you is that it's no longer for you." I hung up. They were used to my silent endurance. Now they'd have to get used to my silent absence. The next morning, another alert. Suspicious login attempt. Possible fraud. I didn't have to guess. "Dad." I called Logan. He whispered, "Dad's tearing through Mom's old notebooks, trying to hack your accounts." I closed my eyes, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest. "If anything weird happens, lock the doors. Call me immediately." "I will," he promised. I boosted my security even higher. Longer passwords, fingerprint, locks. No loopholes. But that night I couldn't shake the feeling, and the next morning, it exploded. "Rachel!" Tessa called out, panicked from the living room. "Someone's banging on the door!" I rushed to the peephole. My heart dropped. It was Dad, fists hammering the door, eyes bloodshot, voice booming. "Rachel, you think you can just walk away?" I grabbed my phone, hands steady as I dialed 911. "You forced me out of your house. You don't get to force your way into my life now." Tessa stood trembling behind me, clutching the keys. I nodded to reassure her, then spoke into the phone. "Yes, he's my father, but he's threatening me and trying to force his way in." The dispatcher stayed calm. "Officers are on the way. Stay inside. Do not open the door." Through the peephole, I saw Dad pacing, hammering the door, muttering, "Ungrateful. After everything I did for you." Tessa whispered, "This has gone way too far." "I know," I said, "but he needs to learn. He has no power over me anymore. Sirens split the air. Heavy boots pounded up the stairs. A knock. Police! Open up! I opened the door and stepped aside. The officers confronted Dad. Sir, you're causing a disturbance. You need to leave. Dad's face flushed. She's my daughter. I have the right to talk to her. Not like this, the officer said firmly. She called us. She feels threatened. I'm not going anywhere, Dad roared, lunging toward me. I stepped back instinctively. The officers restrained him swiftly. You owe me, he screamed. I'm your father. I have rights. That phrase, I have rights, echoed like the last chain snapping. For years, he had used those words to control me. But now, I owe you nothing, I said clearly. You pushed me out. Live with it. The handcuffs clicked shut. The man who once towered over me was dragged away, shouting, You'll regret this, Rachel. You'll pay for betraying your family. I said nothing. When the door closed, Tessa touched my arm gently. Are you okay? I nodded, though my throat was tight. I just didn't think it would come to this. You did what you had to do, she said softly. Sometimes you have to walk away from what hurts you most. I collapsed onto the couch, hands still trembling. My phone buzzed. A text from Logan, Dad. Got arrested, I replied quickly. Yes, stay safe. Call me if anything happens. I thought it was finally over. But 3 days later, Logan texted again. Sis, your car's parked outside the house. My heart twisted. I called him immediately. Logan, are you sure? My car's still with Tessa. I know, he said, but it's here. Window cracked open. Mom's coffee bag is inside. There was only one possibility. Mom had stolen it. I called Tessa immediately. Check the spare key in your drawer, I said. Is it still there? Yes, she confirmed. That meant Mom, or Dad, had made a copy without telling me. Without a word, I took Tessa's car and drove to my old neighborhood. There it was, my dark blue sedan, parked outside the house, too quiet, too wrong. I walked toward it carefully. The handle was dusty, but inside, a water bottle, unfamiliar sneakers, and a grocery receipt dated 2 days ago, with Mom's name on it. I clenched my fists. I called Logan. You? Home? Yeah, Mom's inside. Just got back from the store. I nodded to myself. Stay upstairs, don't get involved. I rang the doorbell. Mom opened it, purse clutched tightly in her hand. Her face tightened the moment she saw me. Rachel, what are you doing here? You took my car, didn't you? She scoffed lightly. It was just sitting there. You weren't using it. I borrowed it. Borrowed? I laughed, cold and sharp. You've been driving it for a week. With whose gas? Money? And why's the seat reclined? Like someone's been sleeping in it? She turned away, refusing to answer. I stepped inside, scanning the living room. My laptop, the one I left behind, was missing. Where's my laptop? I demanded. She stiffened. I sold it. For money? For medicine? And this house needs so many things. You don't live here anymore, she added. I stared at her for a moment, then pulled out my phone. Then you'll deal with the consequences. I'm your mother, she cried, and you stole from me. I called 911. The officers arrived quickly. I explained everything, showed them the receipt, the GPS logs. They turned to Mom. We'll instruct her to return what remains. You can file a theft report if you wish. Mom's face was pale, her hands trembling. Rachel, what are you doing to your own mother? She whispered. I looked her in the eye. I'm doing what you should have taught me, protecting what's mine. I walked out without looking back. 3 days later, a message flashed on my phone. You think you've won? You'll regret betraying your family. I didn't need a signature. I knew exactly who sent it, Dad. It was Uncle Mark, Logan whispered. Dad called everyone he knew asking for money. Mark showed up this morning, handed Mom an envelope. I leaned back, feeling my muscles tense. Mark, Dad's old drinking buddy, the man who threw parties so wild the cops were regular guests. If he bailed Dad out, this wasn't just rescue. It was alliance and trouble. Logan continued, voice tight. Last night, Dad said, he's going to make you feel what it's like to be pushed out. I jumped up from Tessa's couch. Tessa turned, alarmed. What's wrong? My dad made bail, and he's already sending threats. Her face paled. You can't stay here anymore. Do you think he knows this address? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He doesn't give up, she said. You need to leave. Tonight. I nodded grimly. That evening, I called Nora, a coworker who once offered me a room. Without hesitation, she said, come anytime. You don't have to explain. I packed quickly, a few clothes, my laptop, important documents. Everything else could wait. Tessa helped me load the car. Before leaving, we double-checked the cameras, smart locks, alarms. If anything happens, she said, I'll call the police immediately. I nodded, heart heavy but steady. Tonight, I wasn't running away. I was choosing survival. On the drive to Nora's, my phone buzzed again. You can run, but you can't hide forever. Family is forever, Rachel. I didn't reply. I simply screenshotted it and forwarded it to the police with a note. Being threatened by my biological father, I no longer feel safe. He wasn't going to give up, but this time neither was I. That weekend, morning, I returned to the old house with a police officer for a civil standby. Logan waited on the porch, backpack slung over one shoulder, exhaustion in his eyes. You sure you want to go in alone? He asked quietly. I nodded, turning to the officer. I'm just here to collect my things. Please intervene if necessary. The door creaked open. Mom sat on the sofa, clutching her purse like a life raft. Dad stood, stiffly in the kitchen, cold and silent. I didn't look at either of them. I went straight upstairs to my old room. The closet had been emptied. My belongings stuffed into 2 plastic bags. Personal items, old books, keepsakes, scattered photos. I packed them without hesitation. They weren't memories anymore, just debris from a life I had already stepped away from. Dragging the suitcase downstairs, I caught Mom standing. You're not going to say anything? She snapped. After everything? I paused, but didn't turn around. I said plenty in the past. You never listened. It was your father's fault, she cried. I turned to face her fully. You stayed silent while he humiliated me. You stood by when he kicked me out. You sold my belongings like I didn't exist. She dropped her gaze, unable to answer. Dad stepped forward, anger simmering. You think cutting ties is the solution? I laughed dryly. I'm just living what this family taught me. If you're not respected, you don't stay. I pulled a folded restraining order petition from my pocket. If either of you tries to contact me, shows up, or hacks my accounts, this goes into effect. Feast. Officer beside me nodded in confirmation. I turned to Logan. You can stay a few more months if you have to. But if it gets bad, call me. I'll come. He nodded without speaking. I left that house without looking back. Not at them, not at the memories. That chapter of my life was over. When Logan turned 18, he didn't throw a party. No posts, no celebrations, just a text. Sis, I'm ready. I picked him up the next morning. A black backpack hung from his shoulder, holding a few clothes, some books, and a small framed photo. The 2 of us from my college days. No one came to see him off. The house sat dark, curtains drawn tight against the world. Not taking much? I asked, loading his bag into the trunk. Logan shrugged. The rest isn't worth bringing. He moved into the dorms at the community college where I once studied. I helped him settle in, bought him supplies, and we shared a simple dinner at a small noodle shop. Across the table, we smiled at each other, like survivors finally waking from a long nightmare. Do you think they'll try to find you? I asked. Definitely, Logan said calmly. But I'll do what you did. Cut them off. They don't have any power over me anymore. I squeezed his hand, pride swelling in my chest. Since then, he's called often, to brag about a good grade, laugh about a roommate, or vent about a professor obsessed with iced coffee. And each time, his voice sounded freer, lighter. As for my parents, after Logan and I left, everything collapsed. Dad couldn't hold a job. Mom's part-time paycheck wasn't enough. Within a year, they lost the house to unpaid rent. The last I heard, they were living in a rundown apartment on the east side. A bitter letter found its way to my old address, full of blame and desperation. I didn't respond. I had built a life from scratch, and there was nothing left to give. One crisp autumn afternoon, Logan and I sat by the river. "You know," he said, "if it weren't for you, I wouldn't believe life could be different." I squeezed his hand, looking at the vibrant sky. Nothing is worth sacrificing yourself for people who refuse to change. We didn't need a perfect family. We needed each other, two kids once lost, now walking forward, free.